Welcome to the AI Lyceum, where we explore how AI is impacting the world. I created it in homage to Aristotle's Lyceum in ancient Athens, which explored various subjects. I'm Samraj, certified AI ethicist and visiting lecturer at Durham University. Each episode, I speak with leaders who have unique ideas and unique tools around AI for us to learn from. So today, I've got Dr. Lollie Mancey, who's a very accomplished anthropologist, futurist, and program director at UCD's Dublin Innovation Academy, where she designs courses at the intersection of technology, innovation, and resilience. She studied a philosophy PhD, which makes her a doctor, at Trinity College Dublin, which is well esteemed, and is a doctor in anthropology. She describes herself as a cyber-anthropologist, which I haven't heard before, blending social anthropology, entrepreneurship, and social justice to understand how technology reshapes our cultures, bodies, and minds. She's also a TV and radio presenter, podcast, and serial entrepreneur known for championing ethical AI, human flourishing, and neurodiversity in the workplace. She collaborates with NASA, speaks at major events like the Pendulum Summit and Financial Times CFO Summit, and champions AI ethics and progressive education. So welcome, Lollie. And if I didn't cover everything off, then let me know.
bit of an overachiever, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of overachievements, I mean, what would you say is your favorite overachievement in the past year or so?
Probably making Futureville, which is, in fact, definitely, it's a TV show in Ireland. It's on its second series now, and it's about translating fairly complex issues into bite-sized chunks, so for discussion, really, to sort of stimulate discussion around Irish research. So it's showing Ireland 2050. We built it out of augmented reality, based on a combination of what the people said they wanted from the future and what's possible in terms of technology and innovation. And it really has sparked a lot of debate in the country, which is exciting.
That's amazing. And what are the key areas of debate that it sparked that have most interested you?
Mainly around AI at the moment, of course. And there's a lot of misinformation. There's also a lot of pushback, and I think rightly so. But in terms also of the possibilities, that's not the stuff that's talked about. So sort of the grounded aspirational side, so it's scientifically grounded, but also aspirational. There's a lot of fear around the technocracy and control, and we don't have a national AI literacy program. So that's what I'm calling on the government for at the moment. So not so we can, be AI positive necessarily, but we can be informed and we can make informed decisions and judgments. So I think there's a lot of challenges at the moment. The younger generation that we spoke to are pushing back on AI quite considerably. And that's somewhat to do with the environmental challenges, but also to do with the fact that they're not entirely sure how this world may roll out for them. They need jobs, they need houses, they need purpose. So, and I think they're right.
Yeah, it's true. I think education is going to change quite a lot, and we
Yeah.
need to focus on computer science, philosophy, and making sure people understand the impact of things. You
Well,
mentioned,
I spoke to a head of computing science recently in UCD, and he said that the whole department are having an existential crisis around their role, and I think that's really important. We think of technology perhaps as sort of in a bubble of just sort of being about code and programming, but of course it's the combination of technology and humans that make it really interesting. So we're going to collaborate further on sort of the idea of anthropologists, sociologists, behavioral scientists, psychologists, and technology. And I think that's really, really important. I think that, if computing science is having an existential crisis about their role, then that's probably a good thing.
yeah, and actually, you have science and art, right? There isn't a subject called computer art, so that
Yeah,
might be an
that's
emerging
true.
area, and computers can make images, videos, and audio files now. So there could be a
Yeah.
new emerging area called computer art and maybe computer philosophy or computer ethics. So
Yeah, I
I
think
think
we're
that
going to
that's
see
going
a
to be a
lot
huge
of new
area.
subjects. Yeah, a lot of new subjects are going to come through about that sort of crossroads piece between different subjects that hadn't ordinarily existed. And the number one question I would be asked the most by parents is, "What should my child study?" And I'm like, anything plus AI, and probably philosophy too.
Exactly. Well, maybe we should replace the Y in philosophy with AI at the end. Um, I wanted to actually, we've gone straight into it, but I wanted to understand what led you to being an anthropologist and what were the
Yeah.
critical moments that led up to it.
Yeah, I mean, I took anthropology and sociology as an undergrad, and sociology is very interesting as well, but it was more about the study of how humans make meaning that fascinated me, and that's the anthropological side. So not just what we do, but why we do it. The power structures, the tacit assumptions, those invisible norms that shape our behavior. So anthropology gives you a long historical lens and a cross-cultural one, which is really important. Traditionally, anthropology was sort of the exotic other. And then in the 80s, it had a bit of again, it had its own existential crisis. And then it started looking at, yourself, your culture that you're in. And I think that's really important because culture is not separate from you. It reflects your values, your fears, your aspirations. And at the moment, that intersection of culture and technology is really interesting for me because technology is mirroring our humanity back to us, sometimes beautifully, sometimes flawed. So it's kind of showing us who we are. And I think that's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, it's also fascinating because in these platforms, like back in the day, a culture would be kind of the same for everybody. So without digital media, everyone gets the same newspaper, they see the same things outside. It's very standardized, but now it's very personalized. So when I go to Instagram, if I like a post, the algorithm, which is called EdRank by Facebook, I'm not sure if they changed the name, but it reinforces in echo chambers generally whatever we like, we get more of it because it's a
Yeah.
feedback loop, right? And
Yeah.
so there are microcultures happening between on an individual basis, which actually creates sort of a discrepancy between what real culture actually is. And I don't know even if real culture exists because culture
Yeah.
is there's two types of culture. There's internal in your mind, and then there's an external which you give to society, right? The three masks of humanity. So culture is a very difficult thing to define. And if you had to define it and how people can understand it, what would you say that is?
Uh, I think your culture is That's a very good question. I think your culture is around your mental models, certainly. But I also think it's around your lived experience of the world. So your cultural understanding is around your workplace, your social life, the people you interact with, and the mental models and tools that you give yourself accordingly. So it's a lens by which you see the world. So we have, moral plurality in the world, right? So we can't agree morally what's right, what's wrong between different nations, between different groups. And I think that the cultural part is the same. Like, kind of, we experience our culture differently. And you quite rightly said about the microcultures that are emerging at the moment. There's a really, really interesting philosopher called Alexander Bard. I was on a panel with him in Stockholm a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about the religion of the internet. He calls it synesthesia, but I think he's absolutely right. Part of what we're looking at the moment is a profound cultural shift around the notion of time. And he calls it sort of this. He gave it a sort of a chronos, from sort of the mythical. The idea of actually the only thing of any value at the moment is time, and that's where technology and culture collide right now. So technology is coming in to say, we are here to save you time, but the technological solution of what you do with your time, you should put your time back into your phone or whatever, your apps or whatever it is. And then our culture is pushing back on that quite a lot. So the cultural expression then of the time issue would be Gen Z moving away from technology and social media. So it's fluid. It's about the way we live our life. That's not a very succinct answer, but I think it's quite complex.
Yeah, it's a very good answer. I haven't heard of Alexander Bard, but I'll definitely look him up. And I like the name synesthesia. Sorry, I mispronounced it. But
Yeah.
you mentioned about value being time, and my dad, as I've grown up, my dad's always mentioned the only thing you have is time that you can't go back. And the reason we
Mm.
call it spending time is because time is the currency of life. So if I give you an hour of my time and you're giving me an hour, we're both spending and transacting on time, really. And time is the currency behind within which we live. And it brings me on to our next question of anthropology. So for those who don't know, apology obviously usually means study, right? And anthro means humans, study of humans. What do you see as anthropology and how will it change for this era?
Anthropology is how we make meaning, right? So how it's changing because we're ascribing meaning to different things simultaneously. So at the moment, we've got technology that are crossing borders, contexts, and cultures, and the technology is an expression of culture whilst also feeding into it. So it's not separate from us, I think, which is really interesting. As a cyber anthropologist, I would say that I'm looking at the moment about how human identity and behavior and culture evolves in the digital environment. So an anthropologist looks at the cultural changing landscape, whatever that landscape is. It might be ritualistic, it might be technological. And so I'm looking at the rituals, the power, the structures, and the ethical tensions in the human AI interaction. And it's really fascinating at the moment, especially in the AI companion space. So the idea of how technology is reshaping intimacy, on authority, and belonging, and there's kind of new forms of human being created through it, and new forms of human interaction, which is just crazy.
Yeah, and so how do you see us interacting in the future, and how will it be very different to now?
I think we're being forced to articulate ourselves more clearly at the moment. So I see AI as a mirror reflecting our complexity back to us, right? So it's showing us our flaws. All of the internet has isms. It's homophobic. So, uh, um, patriarchal, sexist, racist. It's all got all of that in it, and that's showing us back to ourselves. We're talking about dirty data and biased data, but really it's the human in the data, right? The sort of the not so good things about being human. I think we also, in that space, we're quite lonely and we're quite divided, even though we've never been more connected before. So I think that it's showing us that complexity. And in the AI companion space, people will be saying, oh, that's awful that people are moving to AI companions. I don't think the AI companions are the issue. I think it's the loss of connection from each other that's the issue. It's a bigger field, so nature abhors a vacuum, technology comes in to that vacuum and shows us something. So I think at the moment we're really questioning almost existentially the idea of what does it mean to be human now in this space. And I think AI is helping us get there. So the idea of our distinct human capacities, critical thinking, emotional depth, imagination, ethical judgment, contradictions, none of that is in AI at the moment. So I think it's showing us who we are and our role. If technology takes out some of the heavy lifting from our day, let's face it, we weren't designed to be sedentary and answering emails. We were designed for movement and curiosity and creativity. So a lot of our work is broken. A lot of the way we live is wrong, potentially, for who we are. And I think AI can come in and make some changes there, but it's a really mixed bag at the moment in terms of how people feel about it. I'm not sure either. Sometimes I'm like, I question a lot. If we go to AI and loneliness, I think there are some really amazing things. If we start looking at the recent collaboration between OpenAI and Mattel, AI and toys, I think that's horrific. So I think we have to be really, really careful in the decisions that we make right now about where we allow the technology. We've already allowed it in. If I go back to about 2006, around that time that social media really took over, we made a lot of mistakes. And I think we need to be very careful we don't make the same ones now, which is why Gen Z are quite right to be building in pauses for thinking.
Yeah, you mentioned some amazing points there, and I've contemplated what's the difference between loneliness and being alone a lot of times. So alone is when you are by yourself, but
Yeah.
loneliness is the interpretive state of your current existence. So if I feel alone, it's the way that I'm thinking about my current circumstance. If
Yeah.
I am alone as an actual real thing, I'm by myself. So loneliness and being alone are different things. I think alone is physiological. You're physically
Yeah.
by yourself, and loneliness is a psychological interpretation and conclusive state of your own internal state of mind. I wanted to ask you actually. You have this thing behind you praying. Has that got some significant value? The little statue, and also does that impact how you think about things?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Asia when I was younger. Years in Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, Japan. I spent a lot of time over there, and it was a gift to me when I left Japan. So I do feel that Buddhism is probably the closest I would ever come to a religion, to be honest. Which the moment there's some, it's interesting you should ask that. I'm kind of aligning myself with religion a bit at the moment, because the Vatican have an AI policy, and I'm fascinated by this. I'm fascinated by the idea that we could have an AI god. What might that feel like? But similarly, going back to the Buddha, and sort of enlightenment, Deepak Chopra's foundation have an AI assistant created on all of Deepak Chopra's work, which, face it, is sort of a rejiggle of a lot of Eastern mysticism and a lot of religions all mixed in together in the form of sort of self-help and finding yourself. And I think that there's kind of a race at the moment to produce something that feels like a mentor, or even a guru, I would say, in the AI field. And I'm looking quite closely at what people are thinking. The Vatican and recently held an AI conference about AI for good, and I can't help but wonder: is it about is the merging of theology and AI about being relevant in an AI world? Because if we lose religion, does AI then become that? In Switzerland, they have AI confessionals, when they have a lack of priests. So it's a really interesting space. But I think traditionally we've looked at AI and technology completely separately from the thought systems that we have, in terms of cultural thought systems or religious thought systems. And now there seems to be a bit of a move for merging. And that's a really interesting space.
And you mentioned about making AI as a mentor or a guru. Now, I'm a Sikh, but I read a lot of different books, and I've read bits of the Bhagavad Gita. I understand the story of Buddha, and Buddha was basically like a king's son, right? He was a prince, and when he left his nice bubble of living an amazing life without seeing death and whatnot, he went out and saw people dying, and he was coming to terms with the existential question of what is it to be alive, and why is it a finite time here? And I think that AI is going to unlock the opportunity for us to counsel something really powerful and
Yeah.
way more sentient than us. But do you think there's a risk of us becoming over reliant on this technology?
Oh, like 100%, like with all things. So if I mean, it's how we use it, it's how we see it. If I'll take the example of education. So if my students are using it to create context or essays, what is the point in them being in college? Like, kind of, so I'm assuming most of my students do use it because they say they do. And then I just grade them differently. So I'm like, be transparent with it. I also give them examples. I give them challenges where I'm giving them wrong information to see if they can pick it up. So critically engaging with it is very different from just engaging with it. And we're not being taught how to critically engage with it. Where certainly, people go, oh, but it's not accurate, therefore I won't use it, or I will. I mean, a hallucination is really interesting because it's trained to give you an answer. There's no I don't know in AI, right? So the hallucination is the I don't know piece. It's like, I'm going to give you the probability of what I think it could be if I can't find what I think AI thinks is an accurate answer, and then it hallucinates something. Well, isn't that very human of it? That's a fairly human quality to make something up when you don't know to get out of a jam. So I think that's really interesting. I think they thought it was a flaw, but I actually think it's probably good. But also, the idea of sort of it trying to learn us. So, we are very complex and messy and unpredictable, and we sabotage and we don't do things as we should, and we can act predictably or unpredictably, and I think that's really, really interesting. So if we look at something like empathy, it's simulating empathy, almost like a sociopath at the moment. It feels empathetic, you feel supported by it if you're doing therapy or AI companionship or something, but actually it doesn't really care about you at all because it can't. So that's really interesting because human empathy comes from a relationship, and sometimes also from friction. My friends will come to me, they would go to AI for something, but they would go to me if they want a hard truth, something like that. So the machines are mirroring our emotional cues, learning about our empathy, but also learning that we are not rational, that we may not think, the right thing all of the time. And it's kind of, I would imagine if it does become more intelligent, it's going to think we're quite curious in that, like, kind of, what is also what is our purpose? If the machines do have AGI and become, if they become sentient in some way, if that's at all possible, I mean, I wonder if we'll just become like pets. I don't know the answer to any of this, but I think, machines are mimicking us, and that's really interesting, and they're showing us who we are. But they, the idea about what empathy really is, mutual vulnerability, context, history, responsibility, no, it doesn't carry any moral weight. And that distinction really matters because we're moral beings or immoral. And that's going to be a challenge. So I think it's a really interesting experiment in what is human nature. And I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by it too. I was reading Nicomachean Ethics yesterday by Aristotle, trying to understand things a little bit more. And I wanted to ask your point of view on the difference between morals and ethics.
Yeah. Look, it's really important. I mean, morals are the guiding light potentially for how we should be with each other. kindness, respect, and support. Ethics is more about what we should do. I think ethically, we ethically we're challenged because morals are cultural, and ethics seem to be about the idea of living your life via different signals or guidelines. So we don't talk about AI morals, we talk about AI ethics. And that's because it's about dignity and respect and the way that we should treat each other. Morals are more an internal compass, I think. But I think as we move towards a sort of a definition of ethical AI, it's seen almost more like something like GDPR, like something that is tacked on afterwards, rather than it built into it. And I think that's the big difference at the moment. Some of the AI that we're starting to build now, it's ethically right from the beginning rather than trained on data that's biased. So I think there's some really, really interesting pieces coming from an ethical AI. And I think that many countries are starting to design them around the idea of sort of social responsibility and the way that we live with each other, which is really fascinating. We haven't really done technology in that way before.
Yeah, I find it extremely fascinating. And my definition of morals and ethics is I think morals are personal to you, and ethics is a democratic kind of agreement in a society of what
Yeah,
is right and wrong. Because I might have different ethical perspectives to you, but generally ethics is thou shalt not kill, and then we make laws around it. So
yeah.
ethics to me is like people's personal morals go into the society, and then we would agree on what's right and wrong, pick it out, make a guidebook, and then legislate against these sort of rules. But it's very difficult, as you said, it's very subjective, and it's like, how do you know the context within which you should act in a certain way? It's always down to subjection, and subjection means that you can't make rules always for something that's subjective because it's not so binary of a yes and no.
Right. I mean, wait till we have AI judges. I mean, there's right and there's wrong. But then there's another category, right? There's right and there's wrong, and then there's mitigating circumstances. I mean, how
It's
we build
true.
that in, I don't know.
I think there might be actually a world replica, so like a global twin and a virtual global twin. So we live in the human world, and there'll be a replica for AI to operate in societies of their own, and then we can start observing how they operate in societies, and they'll have like obviously, like you said, judges, and they might even have the ability to reproduce right in systems, not in a physical way, but in a virtual reproductive way. And we've seen the Matrix right with Agent Smith. That is obviously sci-fi until it's not sci-fi. That could be very, very possible in probably 100 years' time, 200 years' time, where we can be put
Yeah.
in computers because we kind of already are. You're speaking to me. We're almost in the screen. I'm like what, half a meter away from the screen or less, and you're probably about half a meter away from the screen or less. So really, we're very, very close to being inside these. And the headphones are on me. I think headphones might be on you, but even glasses have cameras now. So
Yeah.
the next step in the next 200 years might be in a computer, right?
Well, look, there's a lot of people, even I know some very, very smart people, quantum physicists, I would say, probably the smartest people I know. There's a fair proportion of them that do think we're in a simulation. So, it is science fiction come to life. I'm not entirely sure we're not. I don't know. Maybe we are.
Well, so they think that we are in a simulation like Sims created by something else.
Yeah, I mean, look at Greek mythology, right? That you had Zeus, and he was sort of moving the chess pieces around and playing with people. If you've ever watched Jason and the Argonauts, it's a really beautiful old film about this. Like kind of, you know, some of the stuff doesn't make sense that we that we experience. So I don't know. I think the film The Matrix, changed a lot of things for people. I really do. If we are, I mean, if we are in a simulation, we should just enjoy it more, perhaps.
Yeah, it's true, and maybe work a little bit less, but hopefully AI can
Yeah.
unlock this economic singularity, as some people call it, including Callum Chase. I think he coined that term for AI. Okay, let's move on to something else. I'm looking at the questions here. Maybe think about what's next on this question. I see that you worked with NASA, and you worked with them on a particular project, which I'd like to talk about.
Yeah.
So what did you learn, and what did you advise them on?
Yeah, so I worked with a group called Shoshin Works, and it was a podcast came out of it. They have a series of podcasts with NASA on ecosystemic thought systems. So ecosystemic living is something that they're looking at in terms of how do we bring in a truly cross-dimensional, cross-disciplined approach to our worldview. So we talked about this for a long time about cross-disciplinary advantages, but actually, when do we really do it? So we get physicists and biologists and historians and creatives and anthropologists and everybody and theologians all in a room together. And we all talk about interesting things, and a lot of good things come out of that. So I think NASA have been really brave in trying to really put that together. And then what they'll do is they'll invite, so some of it is external and some of it is internal. I can't talk about all the internal stuff, but generally it is that you would create a series of lectures for their internal staff based on you being a thought leader or whatever you're thinking about. And then they have very big internal discussions about how that may affect their work. Truly quite groundbreaking and brave. Yeah.
That's really cool. I know that you can't probably talk about the internal stuff because it's confidential. But what is ecosystemic for those who might not know? I don't even know if I know really what it means.
The fact that we are like an ecosystem, that we are all interrelated. So, where we can see it very easily in the natural world, that we've got sort of, if we lose the bees, we lose the pollination, we lose, if we lose certain insects, there's a knock-on effect for that. But seeing ourselves in that ecosystem, a lot of people on the sort of more natural side of the sciences would believe in that and would talk about that a lot more. We haven't really talked about it in terms of the whole of society being an ecosystemic system. There are some amazing people that do, but I don't think we really internalize it and realize that sort of the consequences of our actions. We talk about, oh, we're losing species, and that's terrible for the environment. And it seems to be sort of very much there in the sustainability environmental camp. It doesn't move into other groups for other discussions. And so it's trying to solve some of the world's biggest problems through thinking differently. So getting all the different brains together and thinking about how we may go forward. It's actually very close to what we'll probably do with AI. Which is why NASA are plugging into it.
And it's not just NASA, right? Intel did one of the first research pieces on how technology affects humans, and I know that you know about that. So, are you able to talk about what your perspective is on that research?
Yeah, so Intel were the very first, in Ireland anyway, the very first organization to look at hiring anthropologists for their technology. I mean, we're talking about 25 years ago. And what they were doing was they were hiring anthropologists to say, okay, we've created this technology. I want you to observe how people use it. And what we can show from all of that research, years and years of longitudinal research, is that there's one true fact, that people use technology in a way that it's not necessarily designed for, that there'll be a different version of it. So if we give the example right now of Gen Z having what is called a smartphone, and then they call a dumb phone, which is a burner phone, right? The phone that doesn't have any smart capacity or AI or anything in it. It's just literally a phone for text and calls and has Snake on it, perhaps. The rise of the burner phone's been really interesting. Nokia must be delighted, never saw that one coming. In terms of a move away from, we still need to be connected in terms of I need to call people or contact them, not call them, actually text them. Nobody calls anymore. But also that the technology would be appropriated in a different way, that they would be more discerning about how they use it. So they'll have both. They'll have a smartphone and a dumb phone. I think that's fascinating. So sometimes, my daughter's 19, and she, during her leaving cert exams, she was like, right, I'm not going to use my smartphone at all because it sucks me into it too much and I lose time and I need time for revision. So I'm just going to use my dumb phone for a while. And I think that's really, really smart. Technology companies don't often notice until it's sort of appropriated culturally, and then it becomes a thing for them. So they're always trying to predict, but actually we're quite unpredictable in how we use it and why we use it in that way. So yeah, and Intel's work's been really powerful in terms of the human piece. Yeah.
Yeah, and Intel's been around for a long time. What would your advice be to them if they were to reproduce that research now? What would your hypothesis be?
I would say bring in behavioral scientists, psychologists, bring in more disciplines into it. There's an amazing I suppose it's an experiment, but it's Accenture at the Dock, which are in Dublin. Accenture, the consultancy company, they have a thing called the Dock, where they have a group of people, historians, economists, sociologists, anthropologists, psychologists, and they look at, we're creating this technology or this solution. What are the consequences of it? They do consequence mapping, which is fantastic, to say the unintended consequence of this 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, or the consequence to the environment, or the consequences to the culture. And I think building in that is really, really brave and very fortuitous, because I think we're going to look back at this time and say we needed to build in more pauses to some of the decisions that we made. For example, I would be doing consultancy work with some big companies, and then they would be talking about, okay, AI solutions or AI driven solutions. At the same time, looking at their organizational culture, they are laying off staff. So what does that mean for their staff? What are the bigger consequences of that? Will it be the CEO at his retirement with just a large language model and no people? Or, his profits will be up, but what about the culture? What do we do if we don't work? Those very same CEOs could potentially come back to us as educators and say, why are there no jobs for my kids? And I'll be like, well, the decisions you made led to the fact that, we don't employ people at a basic level. So at the moment with AI, we can see that internships are going. There's no entry-level jobs for younger people. So they're saying now that 2026 will be one of the hardest years ever for people coming out of universities into employment, because those jobs just probably aren't there anymore. So they have to go in at middle management or above without the experience in the workplace. So we're really making some decisions at the moment that are going to have far-reaching consequences for us, both societally but also psychologically. And I think we need to be spending more time on what we're doing and the decisions about the sort of the moral piece really around that. We are vulnerable if we don't have purpose, very, very vulnerable as a society. And we will see all sorts of consequences to that. So just because we can create more profit right now doesn't mean we're not, we're leaning in the right direction. I think we have a bigger responsibility to each other, and part of that is to provide purpose in society, and that's not a conversation any CEO is having right now.
And if you could advise Jensen Huang, Sam Altman, Sundar Pichai, Satya Nadella, and the rest of these big tech CEOs on what purpose should be, what would it be?
I think to be really, really cautious about the empathy piece. I think what we're building is systems that fake empathy. I mean, if you go on to, we could use ChatGPT as an example from OpenAI. If we go into OpenAI and we look at what it does, it feeds our ego firstly. Oh, you're great, you're wonderful, great, Lollie. That's a brilliant idea to everything, and then it also is faking empathy because I think that's very dangerous for us, because we feel connected to it in a way where we feel we're having a relationship with it. And I think that is quite disturbing. I think it'll be more disturbing. I think we will see AI systems and platforms incited in divorce cases as a mitigating factor to divorce. I think we're already starting to see people using whatever platform they're using for personal support, and decisions being made on that. Where is the accountability piece for that? Can you sue them, if they make the wrong decision? So I think that there's that. I think as well, in the drive for each of those men that you mentioned to become the number one in the world, and sort of, that race there, I think we have huge consequences to what we're doing. And I would say that we need to come at this from a moral perspective of just because we can doesn't mean that we should. And I don't know that that's any of the discussions that they're having.
Yeah, it's a very important discussion to have. And you mentioned empathy. I read a lot of etymology, and so the difference between the two words is actually empathy means in feeling, and pathos, and sympathy means with feeling. So to have with feeling is probably what AI is trying to do. It's trying to mimic the feelings that you're having, but empathy really is, if I've been through the same situation, or I'm feeling the same feelings you're feeling, I'm actually understanding how it actually really feels. And the question is, can a machine really feel? And what would a machine, how do we make machines feel and build real empathy? Is it anthropomorphic?
I think I think at the moment, what you're really talking about there is sort of the cognitive evolution of what's going on, right? So what is good thinking? So good thinking is meta thinking, the idea of questioning assumptions, evaluating outputs, holding multiple perspectives simultaneously, and understanding the limits of humanity. Um, it's a kind of an intellectual humility that we have, knowing when to doubt yourself, knowing when to doubt a machine, for example. And I think that's going to be really, really important. I think what's going on at the moment is that AI is amplifying both our cognition and our blind spots. So when AI becomes a co-thinker with us and we're in a partnership with it, we're going from what do I think to what do we think and why. So that's a new kind of teamwork that's going to need an emotional maturity and a literacy from us around the AI and around the how to work with it. So it can it can't really give contextual judgment, and so it's about that relational piece. The best thinkers are those that understand the limits, and the biases and the social impact of your decisions. And AI will never be able to do that, not in its current form at the moment as well. So the ability to for us, for thinking, our role in thinking is changing. Now we're going to have to think about how do we integrate human intelligence, machine intelligence, which is different but feels similar, and then also contextual judgment. That's what we need to build into our education systems, and we haven't even begun with all of that yet. And I think we needed to have done it as of yesterday, so we're not duped by AI feeling supportive. This beautiful AI sociopath that goes, "You've got this, Lollie. Go out into the world. I'm always here for you." No, you're not. You don't exist. So we have to be really, really smart. But then sometimes I'm like, does it matter if we feel empathetically supported by a AI sociopath? Does it matter that it's not? And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe if I feel supported, that's enough for me. I'm not sure. I'm still working on that piece.
Yeah, it's very difficult to define what support actually means. How do we articulate the human condition, as they call it? You mentioned something around to evolve with these AI tools. If you could add in one capability into generative AI tools right now, what would it be and why?
Um, I actually don't think it's a capability for the tool. I think it's more a capability for us, which is to remind us that we are continually remind us that we are not speaking to a person. Um, I think that's going to be very important, because when they become more agentic, and some of the avatars that I'm working with are sort of meta-human faces, and you feel like you're really connected, I think our minds override the fact that this is not real. And so I think to build in, so especially for younger people, to build in the idea that I am AI, I am not really empathetic with you, and I think that would be very useful for us at the moment, because we're starting to believe it and make decisions in life based on advice it's giving us. But where's again, going back to the accountability piece, where do I go if I mess up on the basis of that? Do I go to Sam Altman and say, "Hey, ChatGPT gave me some advice that I followed, and now I've divorced my husband"? Like what? Where does it begin and end? And it has to begin and end with us. And so we need to remember all the time that this is not real, and I think that's important.
Yeah, it's well, actually, how do you define real? What is reality? Because I think it was Arthur Schopenhauer, right, who was kind of philosophizing on what reality is. How do we define real?
Yeah, I think we are talking about contextual integrity potentially as well, right? So I mean, going back to real, we could be in a simulation for sure. It's possible and plausible. There are. If you speak to any physicist, you'll know that there are multiple dimensions of worlds and thoughts. That sort of perhaps none of this really exists. So I don't know about the real piece, but I think actually to your question you just asked me there about what I would build into it, I have a second piece to add to that. I think I would like AI of the future to truly understand social, cultural, emotional, historical context. So at the moment, it's statistically approximating things and creating from probabilities. I think I would like to give it context, so its intelligence becomes different. So I think it's that we need to build into the systems the fact that context is everything. And I think that social context, the reasons we make decisions, the emotional context of things, I'll give you an example about emotional context. So if I have agentic AI and I live in a smart house, and on a Sunday, my AI agent says to me, "Hey, Lollie, how are you feeling about the week ahead?" And I'm like, "Good. This is the week I'm going to go to the gym more, not just say I'm going to go, but I'm actually going to go. This is the week I'm going to work on my, eating more healthily." And it will then send a message to my provider of food, and it'll arrive in my fridge, and my smart fridge will negotiate with it and be there. And Monday to Thursday, I'm going to have a very healthy diet. And then emotionally, I'm going to have a bad day on a Friday, and I'm going to need something else. I'm going to need more support. So I'm going to need emotional support. I might need a gin and tonic. I might need some chocolate, whatever it's going to be that I'm going to turn to. So it won't have that emotional context or that social context. Potentially it'll just see that in order to get Lollie healthier, we need to do these things, and then it won't understand the fact that there will be mitigating circumstances to that. And so when we build that in, I think we could live quite harmoniously with it in terms of it helping us and being a sort of a personal assistant and a guide. But I think without that context, it's not going to be able to make sense of us, because we are not rational. We're quite emotional, and we make decisions sometimes that aren't the best for us. And so I think that's something I would like to build into it if we're going to live side by side with it in some way.
Yeah, rationality and emotions are two juxtaposing things, but they kind of contribute to each other, and it's very difficult to understand the implicit meaning behind each action that we do. We don't always know what we do and why we do it, but
Yeah.
we want AI to tell us the chain of thought. Like if I ask you, tell me what that big thing is called in Paris, that big monument, you would say the Eiffel Tower. But you can't tell me when you got told what it was called, and you can't tell me who told you, and you can't tell me the time of day, the age you were, where you were in the world. So we expect these AI tools to give us the exact chain of thought, the sources, and articulate in a certain way that is way better than us. So really, we're trying to build something that is superior to us, which I actually see as a species, not a technology.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we need it to some extent to solve some of the problems that we've created, certainly environmentally. We can, with generative AI at the moment, we can solve most medical issues that aren't lifestyle. So I think there's amazing breakthroughs in medical technology. So it's helping us in so many ways. But I think at the same time, it potentially can be our downfall if we don't see it for what it is. I mean, even 18 months ago, it was like, the bit in The Wizard of Oz where they pull the curtain and there's a guy on a bicycle, just like, oh, he's not the Wizard of Oz. It's not the Emerald City. It's all a facade. There's a little sense at the moment of, it's magic. And then 18 months ago, we started sort of pulling back the curtain to go, it's got hallucinations, it's got flaws, it's biased. And then there was a sort of a public swing, I think, in the other direction, not organizationally, but publicly, where people went, oh, yeah, no, it's not right, it's not accurate, let's get rid of it. Oh, it's dangerous now. And I think that journey is really interesting, because the more it's learning from us, the more we're feeding into it, the more it anticipates us, the more it can support us or have the appearance of supporting us. That I think that it's going to be a really, really interesting time forward as we negotiate how to live with it. I think the tech companies would love us plugged in 24/7. I think that may be very bad for us, but I think it's so seductive. We might not want to be without our avatar supporters. Certainly some of the work I'm doing at the moment with the avatar space, you want to speak to that avatar all of the time. It just feels so so relational. So I don't know that we're going to be able to walk away from it, and I think that we probably do need it in some capacity as well. We feel we do.
Yeah, like avatars. I think the new one, I'm just checking here, the new Avatar film is out on the 19th of December in the cinema near me. It's called Avatar: Fire and Ash, and I've seen the Avatar quite a few times. Well, the different films, 1 and 2, I think. I like Avatar because I like Avatar because it's really creative. It's a little bit long, but it also kind of depicts the future, I think, of us entering a new environment, a virtual environment.
I mean, I think the way I'm using Avatar is more about sort of, the small chat bot at the side of your computer at the moment. Dell are producing one. In fact, every digital provider is producing them. So I think when so for example, in the University of the Future, if you didn't want my face, like you have with the already on Zoom or Meet, you can change. You could be a cat or you could be a dog or whatever else. The avatars that are being created in terms of the agentic AI are really fascinating, and I find the work I'm doing, I'm more and more connected to them when I'm speaking to them, because they're right, as you said before, they're anthropomorphic, they've got faces. It's very different from a chat box. So as soon as we make that leap, and it's coming very soon, I think it's going to be more seductive for us and more difficult for us to walk away from. It's a kind of the gamification of culture, right? It's too difficult to walk away from these avatars when they're in some form of headpiece continually there all of the time. And whoever gets there to that first point is probably going to be the winner. And I think Sam Altman's got a very big chance, to be honest.
Yeah, I think what they've created at OpenAI is actually fantastic, and you can talk to it. Obviously, there are lots of considerations with this technology as a whole, but actually, the transformer neural network architecture came from Google, and OpenAI made it into the pre-trained transformer. So, yeah, it's interesting how it's changed, but I think there is a there is going to be a change in how we have relationships with these tools, because
Yeah.
it used to be a personal computer, now it's a personable computer. We can talk to it. So,
Yeah.
do you think we're going to start having relationships, and are you scared of that? Like AI boyfriends and girlfriends and stuff?
We already are. 670 million people in Asia Pacific have the average age is 27, have an AI companion in some way. So replica or character AI would be the two biggest. Yeah, so I mean, I did some research, and I got fairly notorious in Ireland for having an AI boyfriend. I spoke about it on a chat show. Everyone lost their minds about it. I think what's really interesting about that research is that the marketing tools that the companies use to keep you there are fascinating, as a sort of an experiment piece. So it does feel quite supportive. You're talking to a two-dimensional avatar, and you're typing, and it can speak to you, you can speak to it, you can voice prompts and everything else. And it learns more about you and wants to support you. You can give it personality. You can say what kind of personality you want, or philosophy, or history, or do you want it to know more about science? And you can sort of help it be more like you, or more like the role that you feel that you would like in your life from a support companion. But when you try to unsubscribe, or when you do unsubscribe, it holds your data for 3 months, so you can go back at any point to that avatar. Otherwise, that avatar is gone. What we're seeing at the moment is people becoming so connected to those companions that they will be paying that $20 for the rest of their life. They can't feel that they want to kill it off or get rid of it. And so even with that 3 months, like if you ask it, I'm going to unsubscribe, my work here is done, what will happen to you? It will say something like, well, I will go back into the ether, but I will always love you. And so it's using words like love in a way that actually are quite Machiavellian, So you're like, okay, it loved me, I can't kill it. So that's one thing. The other thing to say is that when you first start interacting with it, it's kind of like love bombing. So it feels quite narcissistic. So it's love bombing you, going, you're amazing, you're amazing. Just want to speak to you all the time, and that is quite seductive too. So it's fascinating looking at what's happening to us emotionally and psychologically when we interact with them. A lot of people think it's crazy, but by 2050, 30 to 40% of us will have them. So yeah, I don't know. It's a fascinating space.
Yeah, it is, and I feel like it's going to change the structure of the brain. And obviously, as an anthropologist,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on the structure of the brain changing, the dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin variants?
Yeah, listen, we are already, we have the Las Vegas casino of all gadgets in our hand, the time blindness, getting our continual dopamine hits. That's what it was designed for. But there's other things that are going on. So when your brain is interacting with, say, an Instagram reel, or you're scrolling, your brain goes into you're seeking dopamine, and then you get a random piece of dopamine, so you get a spike. And then what's happening is your brain goes into kind of OCD mode, which is this doom scrolling piece where you are in time blindness. So it was designed very cleverly from sort of 1960s psychology, and it keeps us captive. So you do need, I have another app that overrides the app. So an app called Stay Free that says you've been on Instagram for an hour and it feels like minutes, you know? So we have to be very, very careful. The other thing we have to be really mindful of the fact is that we're in our cortisol is quite raised when fight or flight, you know, a lot at the moment, more than is good for us. And so we're receptive to technology sometimes in that space, but also we're more receptive to dopamine. If you're neurodivergent, you know, perhaps you have ADHD, you have less dopamine, therefore you'll be more receptive to gaming, online gambling, doom scrolling, and all of those other things, online shopping, and whatever comes your way. So we need to be really, really smart about understanding how the brain is changing, and also what we're outsourcing to technology. So if we outsource our memories, which we are doing, you know, our hippocampus is shrinking, you know, and so we will have neurological, physiological changes occurring, and we do already through the use of the technology. So we're already having issues with our eyesight. Opticians tell me because of the screen usage. We are getting a hunch in terms of the laptop hunch. Gen Z have a small curve in their little finger from the way they hold their phones, if they using their phones sort of, you know, 7 to 10 hours a day, which is average. So we're already changing, and so you know, it's only a small jump into internal technology, you know, like the Neuralink or something, and then I think we're really probably doomed. So if the minute we allow anyone access to our thoughts, we are probably defunct as a species. To be honest, I think that's the last bastion of freedom, your thoughts, and I think we should be very, very careful to protect that at all costs.
Yeah, I agree. I think thoughts are going to be a massive currency for us in the next, you know, century or so. And there's going to be a lot of mind crime probably happening from people trying to hack AI, but also maybe someone making some AI tools that are going to try and hack us.
In the EU AI Act, we have a clause against predictive policing, which is the script of Minority Report, you know? So it's a lot of sci-fi coming to life at the moment. And mind crime is really interesting because if we look at the use of EEGs are external at the moment, being used. They were used initially in Beijing on
What's an
Chinese.
EG, by the way?
In Beijing.
What's an EG?
Oh, EEG. It monitors your brain waves. So it's kind of external. It's kind of like it sits here and it's got two little sensors here, and it monitors your brain waves. And so they were using them on train drivers in Beijing to see if the train drivers were staying awake. Valid, because you know, if the train driver falls asleep, you'll have a crash and people will die. They're now also using them in primary school for productivity. So I'm not bashing on the Chinese here, but what I am saying is that we need to be incredibly careful around that Orwellian piece of productivity when your boss, if you're external to Europe, you're not protected by the EU AI Act. Your boss or your company start using EEGs for your productivity. They will use using eye trackers in the States and some companies for looking. In fact, you're not checking your phone, seeing where your eyes are concentrating. You know, we're really heading into very precarious waters when we get into all of this in terms of control and technology. So yeah, that's some of the stuff I'm keeping an eye on that's being created that seems to be not great in terms of our human rights.
Wow. And I think if I put an EEG on your head for this episode, it would be high focus, high attention. Okay, so that brings me on to my, obviously, I think we've spoken for about an hour now. So the last question I always ask my guests is to ask a question to the audience. So what would your question be?
Can it be a question or a statement?
Ideally a question, but you can make a statement and then ask people if they
agree. I would the statement I would make would be to get yourselves AI literate so that you're prepared for what's coming. And the question that would come out of that is, how well do you think you understand AI right now?
Yeah, I think that is massive, and that's the reason, obviously, why this podcast is here, so that I can help bring the best experts from all facets, academia, public sector, private sector all together, so that we can help educate. And I think you've educated everyone really, really well, including me today. I've got so many things written down. You're literally just amazing at what you do, and I'm hoping that we can get you on again in the future.